As of late, many of my gaming YouTube contemporaries have been calling on each other to show some of the higher valued games in their collections. Even though no one has tagged me yet, I thought it would be fun to crash the party. I've been collecting video games since the 80s and I've amassed quite an eclectic mix. Instead of focusing on a single system, I've decided to show a few of the higher valued games I own regardless of system and explain how I came to acquire them. I've used pricecharting.com to assess current value, but of course prices can fluctuate and condition is subjective. If my memory serves, I picked this game up at a Walden software store. I've always been one to search out good values, so whenever I see video games on clearance, I search meticulously for any that I want. They were getting rid of all their Virtual Boy games, among others. The selection was a bit picked over, but I wish now that perhaps I'd grabbed a few more, but I did go home with 3D Tetris that day. This Nintendo-published game plays similarly to Blockout and is notable as the system's final official release. For the first several hundred games I added to my collection, I had a pretty good memory of the purchase details, the store, the price I paid, etc. But by this point in my life and collection, some of these details have become a little fuzzy. For this game, I believe that I bought it from Electronics Boutique new, but I wasn't sure of the price. Fortunately, I still have my first video game collection database file that I stopped updating in 1998. Unfortunately, that file's in a now-defunct Microsoft Works format, but I was eventually able to convert it into an active format, and it confirmed my failing memory. This cleverly designed adventure game is the Game Gear game that I paid the most for in my collection, essentially full retail price. Technically, I got this next game for free. The employees at the job I had in 1994 decided to celebrate the holidays by doing a Secret Santa. The spending limit was capped at $20. At this job, I worked the overnight shift alone and had not been there for very long, so no one really knew me there. To help my Secret Santa out, I openly suggested my perfect gift. One of our locally owned video stores had this previous rental game for sale, and it was only $15. My suggestion worked as I had hoped, and even better, it included the box and manual. This Atlas-published NES platformer is heavily inspired by classic cartoons and has a unique difficulty curve. You can play the first 4 stages in any order, Mega Man style, but the game adapts each subsequent stage with an increased enemy count to raise the challenge. This entry will be a twofer. These are 2 of the 3 Zelda games that Philips published for their ill-fated CDI. On a random day of thrift shopping, which is something I rarely do anymore, I had an amazing find. If you are familiar with my channel, you might already know this story. I was browsing my local Salvation Army thrift store's CD section, hoping to find a PlayStation or Dreamcast gem, when I found both of these. They are complete with the cardboard overwraps, manuals, and discs. I don't have a CDI or any interest in getting one, but I'm so pleased that I found these. For these I paid $1 each. Incredibly lucky. My number 1 pick is a game that I recently shared on Twitter. You can follow me there if you want to more easily interact with me. This is Snatcher for the Sega CD. Before Hideo Kojima was a gamer's household name, he wrote and designed this game. I've always been interested in games that shift the boundaries of what's possible in interactive storytelling, and this one certainly fits that description. At the time I bought it from a local used game chain, Sega CD games simply weren't in high demand. This one was one of the higher priced used games on that Sega CD shelf. For this complete in-box game, I paid $15.
Oh, is that you, Gillian? I was just getting to sleep.
These These are a few of the notable highlights across my collection. Look closely and you'll find other hotspots in there as well. This is the advantage of being a longtime collector. Other than the CDI Zelda games, which were simply a fluke, these others were all purchased in what you could consider real time as part of a growing current and previous gen collection. I've owned each of them for over 20 years. My game collection has been a constant. I never got out of gaming to rediscover a nostalgic passion for it later in life. Over the years, I've had brushes with several other sought-after games. As an avid renter, I had momentary possession of current higher-valued games such as Ninja Gaiden Trilogy, DuckTales 2, Mega Man X3, both versions of Sparkster over the same weekend. Interspersed through these VHS tapes are gameplay snippets from some of these games and many others. Renting is one thing, but what about missed purchases? As the Sega Saturn wound down, I watched the copies of The House of the Dead at Target. I wanted one and could have easily bought it, but I eagerly anticipated a clearance price. It never happened and I never found it used. For nearly a year, my local used game store had a Bonk's Adventure for the NES. I couldn't justify paying more for the NES version than I paid for the TurboGrafx-16 version. I looked at it every time I shopped and it never reduced in price. Then one day, it was gone. It was priced $40. This plastic tote is full of video game-related printed works. Advertisements, inserts, just lots of different things from the past several decades. Let me show you something from it. I wonder if Wrestling with Gaming has seen this. Here is an ad for several TurboGrafx-16 games. They all looked very enticing at the time, but this set of screenshots stood out. The colorful, cartoony graphics are right up my alley. I made a mental note of this game as a wanted future purchase. As TurboZone Direct took over the inventory of these games, I was on the mailing list to receive their catalogs. My name and old address is on the mailing label. As you can see, these games had very accessible prices. Even buy one, get one half off. I just never made it a priority to order. The current price of Magical Chase? These are games that I not only had the opportunity to buy, but I wanted to own them as well. I have many more tales that I could tell, but the downside of collection values is summarized by this last story. In the summer of 1993, I was enjoying the benefits of my first summer job. For the first time, I had a regular source of disposable income. Even so, I tended to be careful with my money. But one game got the better of me. It was the first time I severely overspent on a video game. Yoshi's Cookie for the Super Nintendo. At the time, it was typical that first-party SNES games were $50 and third-party games were $60. Through a licensing agreement, the NES and Game Boy versions were first-party Nintendo published, but the SNES version was third-party published by Bulletproof Software, making this version higher priced, $60 after tax. Thinking of that $60 price tag stung. It made no logical sense to want this game. The NES and Game Boy versions had already been released months earlier, and I already bought it for the Game Boy. The only unique gameplay aspect to this version was the inclusion of a puzzle mode, otherwise it was the same game with 16-bit graphics. I mulled it over in my head in the weeks leading up to the release date. After release, I checked it out in store, each time talking myself out of it and leaving. Then one frustratingly overworked Friday, I convinced myself to stop thinking about it and just treat myself. Please understand that Yoshi's Cookie for the SNES isn't a bad game. It's just that, considering my circumstances at the time, $60 was too much to spend on a simple puzzle game. In the vast scheme of things, $60 isn't that big of a deal, but it's the lack of impulse control that bothers me. I live with this questionable decision, and it had the side effect of making me second-guess game purchases thereafter. Those rare games I mentioned that I didn't buy, these circumstances weighed on my mind as I decided to postpone those purchases. But don't get the message wrong. I'm not saying that you should buy every game you are considering. What I am saying is that buying a game in hopes of an increase in value is the same as playing the lottery. I have games that used to have a high collector value, but are worth very little now. But for every Kirby's Dream Land 3, I might have 20 games that are worth less than I initially paid for them. My Yoshi's Cookie is currently worth a third what I spent on it. As impressive as my top 5 might look at first glance, you have to see that they are the exceptions, not the rule. I've never collected with the sole criteria being product value. In all of my collections, my main collecting mantra can be summed up by Discard's catchphrase, "Collect what you love." In any of my collections, I try to only add the things that make me happy and add them only for that reason. In this way, I never really get burnt out. What a trip down memory lane. Thank you for giving me a place to share my experiences. Did I spark any memories in you? Did your channel post a top 5 value list? Definitely share these in the comments below.